Ace Podcast.
This podcast is part of the Dark Myths Collective. Visit darkmyths.org to discover more shows like this one. The darkness awaits.
Hello and welcome to the Not Alone podcast. I'm Jason Moitoso.
And I'm Sam Fredrickson, and welcome to our very special, second ever Jason special. I'm going to just say the same word over and over.
It is hot, it is fresh,
God.
and straight out of the kitchen.
That's his tagline. He's only allowed to use it during the specials. And that brings me to my next point. So if this is your first time listening, this is a different sort of format. I mean, in its own way, it's the exact same. We're telling stories back and forth, all that. But typically, I do 75% of the research, and Jason does 25% and then records. This, on Jason's specials, it's flipped. And I'm allowed a week off to work on other things, like the local legend show, and Jason gets to do whatever the heck he wants.
Yeah, so this week, I want to chop up all your lovely images of Loch Ness Monster and any other sea monster and just throw them into a giant stew and serve it up.
Fresh out the kitchen?
Fresh out the
All
kitchen.
Right. So keep that in mind. If this is your first episode...
Wow, that was really gory for me.
It was. It was gross.
I might have to rethink that.
That's okay.
Well, we're going to go ahead and start with the flow of the water, Sam.
The flow of the water.
We're going to start in lakes.
Okay.
We're starting in lakes.
We're talking about...
It does not move from oceans to lakes. It does not go that way.
I don't think that's...
It's the opposite direction, Sam.
I don't think that's true. But for anyone who missed Jason's very gory metaphor there, we're talking about sea monsters, water
sea
monsters,
lake monsters, large aquatic cryptids.
There we go.
From
All right.
around the world.
I am going to sit back. I'm going to let you talk, and I'm going to interject when I feel it is necessary to the survival of the belief system.
Okay.
So go ahead.
All right. So, again, we're going to start in freshwater content here. And I'm going to go straight into probably the most famous aquatic cryptid ever. Nessie.
What's a Nessie?
Oh my gosh. The Loch Ness Monster, Sam.
I know. I'm just kidding.
Up in Scotland.
Scotland. Oh, no. We're not doing accents again.
That was literally all I got.
That was terrible.
In the law. One of our first sightings that we get is back in 1933 when a man was driving his vehicle down the length of the loch in the middle of the night. And we don't get a whole lot of details about the Loch Ness Monster for the most part. And I don't know if it's because of weather conditions or just the fact that it was very late and very dark. But essentially, what he describes is kind of an amorphous blob blocking the road. But he does make note of at least one appendage, a very long and flowing arm.
Okay.
It was very interesting to actually read about, but it didn't really sound like an arm. It was more like just a tubular body part.
Like a tentacle?
It feels a lot more like that.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Because usually Nessie has flippers.
Right. Usually, and we're getting there.
Okay. All right.
So that's the first sighting that we really see, and he turns back around and drives away. He doesn't. Unfortunately, I'm 33. Having a camera is not necessarily commonplace like it is now. So, and plus, in that kind of lighting, you're kind of screwed. You're not going to take a good shot of anything.
Yeah.
So that was the first sighting we got. And it hits the newspapers. The Daily Mail specifically is the major newspaper that kind of started the Loch Ness Monster craze. From there, we actually got a couple more sightings that are more along the lines of what we think of as Nessie today. Which, the second one happened to be of a kind of large otter-like creature. So we've got 4 limbs now.
Okay. All right.
And then just after that, we have one that is kind of almost a combination of the two.
Okay.
We have more of the classic Nessie, where we have a creature with a long neck, but still kind of like an ottery body as well, and much larger than what an otter is. So I can't for the life of me remember his last name, but I do remember his first name.
Okay.
And it's Marmaduke.
Oh, yeah.
Which is awesome.
What Wittenberg? Is it Wittenberg?
I don't know, man. I heard Marmaduke, and I'm like, this is amazing.
It's a good name.
Anyway, Marmaduke is a big game hunter. So the Daily Mail hires him to track down the monster. And the only thing he found were large footprints.
Mm-hmm.
But under closer inspection by a scientist, those footprints were actually the footprints of a hippo.
A hippopotamus.
A hippopotamus.
A hippopotamus?
Let's
Are
not go.
his lyrics bottomless?
Let's not go down that rabbit hole, Sam.
Okay, all right.
Anyway, which is unfortunate because Marmaduke also owns an ashtray that's made out of a hippo's foot.
Huh.
Because of that discredit, the Daily Mail fires him, humiliates him, and then from there, in 1934, we get the surgeon's photo.
Yes. The
Which is
most
probably
famous, yeah.
The absolute most famous photo of the Loch Ness Monster. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a black and white photo of a creature with a long neck jutting out of the water and a small head. And we can also see kind of the hump of the back of it in the water. Now, the photo that actually got printed in the Daily Mail was a cropped version of the one that I actually have out in our notes, and also a cropped version of the original, which of course you can find pretty easily with a Google search like I had.
Just Google Nessie. It's going to be the first thing that comes up.
So this photo was sold to the Daily Mail by Robert Wilson. He's actually a London gynecologist that was there on vacation at the time. And according to him, he was driving along the road, saw something strange in the water, pulled over, and decided to take a few snapshots. One of them actually turned out to be a good photo, which is now known to be the surgeon's photo. It takes the name surgeon's photo because at first, Robert did not want to actually disclose his name.
Okay.
So they knew it was a doctor of some sort, and that continues and really hypes up the craze about what is living in the loch. From there, we get countless more stories, eyewitness reports, photos along this time up until today, really. And we still even get roughly around high teens of eyewitness reports that there's something in the loch.
Okay.
That being said, we've also done quite a few other research projects with it too. Back in the late, or I believe early 80s, we had sonar sweeps of the loch that were inconclusive. We've had pictures taken, and go ahead.
Well, you're right. Inconclusive is the word for it, but it's exactly that. It's inconclusive. It's not conclusively that there's nothing down there. I was able to find a few different reports. These were not from the 80s. These were actually earlier, I think earlier in the 2000s, of reports that they did have evidence of something in the loch that was moving quite quickly around the bottom. Now, they weren't able to say, exactly what it looked like or how quick it was, but I saw another one. And granted, I wasn't able to really flesh it out. Like I said, on these ones, I don't do a whole lot of research. I just let Jason do the research, and then I act like I'm Jason, and I just interject whenever I want and say whatever I want to say. So, Did you say what you wanted to say? Well, I did see some other ones that were purportedly used by, like, with the use of sonar and some other technologies to create an actual graphic image, and it was an image of a flipper. So, like a really close-up flipper, a big flipper. Yeah. I also saw that picture. You? It's fabricated. Okay, all right. Well, that's the original is actually just of the floor bed, and you can actually see like where the flipper line down the center of the flipper. You can actually see where it's at, and there's just heavy contrast used in order to kind of bring that image up. Right. But the thing about the Loch Ness Monster is it's been there. Theoretically, the first sighting of it was in the River Ness in 525 AD. So it's been around for like a long, long time. It wasn't just these sightings in 1930s. Yeah. They happened because a road was opened by the loch. So suddenly people were going by the loch a lot more. Right. It wasn't that it just popped out of nowhere. I mean, it's been in the folklore for a very, very long time. I'm actually going to touch on that a little bit later on, too. Okay, all right. Go ahead. I'll stop interrupting. Because now I'm going to actually take a harsher scrutiny of how a Loch Ness Monster can survive and actually be in the loch. Right. Because from most reports, Loch Ness Monster
resembles a plesiosaur of some sort, which a plesiosaurus died out in the mass extinction just with the dinosaurs about 60 million years ago, and we haven't seen them since. Not in the fossil records, not an actual real-life photo of them either. And one of the most, for lack of a better word, damning reasons why the surgeon's photo isn't, in my mind, conclusive of everything being there is, for one, when you look at it and the size of the ripples around it,
Right.
it looks incredibly small.
Mm-hmm.
And two, the image itself of having a long neck poking straight out of the water and a head, that was concurrent with what we believed a plesiosaur could do back in the 30s. Now, we have found more skeleton remains of plesiosaurs, more fossils for them, and scientists have figured out that plesiosaurs would not have that level of flexibility in their necks. Their necks themselves were very
straight up.
Correct. Their necks were very stiff. The vertebra on the back just did not allow for the essentially like a swan neck style.
Okay.
Yes.
And there's also the fact that it was a hoax. And
yes.
I feel like that's something that we need as a paranormal community. We need to be able to accept a hoax.
And I feel like a lot, especially I feel like Nessie is an easy one to hoax.
Mm-hmm.
Like there has been so many, mainly because of all the craze and the hype about it.
Right. I found some numbers that said 85% of people who go to Loch Ness go for Nessie.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
which it makes a ton of sense. And it makes a ton of sense of why the Daily Mail, other newspapers would bring the publicity, because that's probably the Loch Ness community's number one like way of growing their economy is through visitation, which probably never happened before this point in time. So there's a lot for the community to benefit of having a lake monster. And I feel like that's probably one of the main reasons why most communities support having a lake monster. Lake Champlain, which I'll be briefly mentioning about him as well. Charlie that we have up in Lake Payette. Plesiosaurs would also not be able to really survive Loch Ness, mainly because of how much food is really there. Loch Ness does not have a very large amount of fish, even though it's a very large lake. The reason being is that it has a lot of debris. And because of that debris, we don't have the lower end of the food chain. We don't have a lot of zooplankton growing. We don't have a big solid base for more fish to survive on.
Okay.
And because of that, it's been theorized that the lake would only be able to support 10 creatures.
Okay.
Maximum. And for any species that have a breeding population, you're looking more around the range of 40. So, now we get to the topic of, well, has Nessie lived for 400, 500 years?
1,500.
Has Nessie lived for 1,500 years as its last remaining species?
Right.
Does that not feel a little far-fetched?
No, it totally does. The Nessie is a great example. Like I just said, we have to be able to say, okay, something's a fake, something's a hoax, and we need to be able to do that and not, because that's where people point fingers at the paranormally inclined and say, like, look at this guy with his, eyes shut and just doing whatever he needs to believe. And we need to be able to accept that, but we also need to say, like, there's something going on here. There's something weird going on here. And even if it's just, because here's my whole problem. I'm going to get into it a little more. I'm not going to get into it now. I have a problem with your entire approach to sea monsters that I'll get into at the end.
Well, we haven't even gotten to sea monsters yet.
I know, but lake monsters as well. And, I mean, the thing about Nessie is it's a matter of faith at a certain point. It's a matter of belief. Like, the lake is big enough for there to be something weird. It doesn't have to be a plesiosaur. That's fine. I personally, while the accounts sound like a plesiosaur, I'm open to it being some other undiscovered creature in general. Something that may not need as much fish as they think. Something that may not be as big as they think. But something
you
that's
just want
still
something to
there.
be there.
Yeah, exactly. And it does come down to want in a lot of cases. I'm more than happy to admit that. There are certain hard evidence pieces, which is hard with the paranormal because you don't have a lot of hard evidence. But there are certain amounts of evidence, whether they're eyewitness accounts or weird stories or incongruities with certain things like Bigfoot. For instance, Bigfoot, I completely and totally, it's not just a matter of faith. I do physically believe in Bigfoot. Same thing with the Wolfmen. But Nessie is like just this sweet, beautiful creature who I really want to be real.
Right.
And so
I want her to be real too.
And so I'm fine. If there's no like actual like boom, this is it, boom, this is it, I'm happy for it to be a mystery forever. But I don't know. I think saying, you know, how long is the frickin' loch? The loch's like 38 miles long.
Oh no, it's a big lake.
For us to
Again.
say we know everything about Loch Ness and we know that there's no monster there, that seems more unbelievable to me than me saying there is a monster there, you know? You dig? You don't have to agree, but you have to dig.
I understand where you're coming from.
All right.
Does that count?
That's fair, yeah.
All right. So
why don't you tell me why lake monsters in general can't exist?
the biggest reason is because pretty much all lakes in the northern hemisphere, at least, were carved away from the progression and recession of glaciers during the last ice age. That alone makes it incredibly difficult for any creature, plesiosaur or anything else that has possibly gone extinct in the past, 12,000 years or so,
Right.
to find a home and a habitat in a lake. That's my biggest thing, is the fact that these sources of water, these bodies of water, were not available during the times of the dinosaurs for anything to get caught in, swim to. And also, megalodons, everyone's favorite
Big old
sharks, officially went extinct during the last ice age as well.
Okay.
Megalodon became one of the biggest rulers of the ocean because it lived during a time where the ocean was a lot warmer of a location. When you have warmer waters, you have more life.
Yeah.
Which means more life can support a bigger predator on the top of the food chain.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the bigger issues, again, with having a sea monster type creature living in a lake system.
Right.
Is that you have to really have a supporting ecosystem for that. Now, that being said, we do have extremely large fish in the northern hemisphere. One that comes to mind and is a very common one, at least in our neck of the woods, is sturgeon.
Yes.
Sturgeon get huge. They are an old fish as well. Fun fact with them, they have been known to actually breach out of the water. And there are some Native American stories of lake monsters knocking people out of their canoes. I think that's really just a sturgeon breaching at the right place at the right time. And sturgeon aren't really a fish for us to really worry about either. They don't have any teeth. They use a vacuum-like suction by jutting out their mouth.
Right.
A lot of fish do that, actually. Some of our biggest things that I think get claimed as being a lake monster are things like sturgeon. When it comes down to Lake Champlain, which in my case, I would assume that would be the location in the northern hemisphere to possibly support a lake monster, because that waterway is huge.
Okay.
There is, in my mind, a fish that lives there, and it is a monster. It's the alligator gar. Are you familiar?
No, I'm not.
The way it
sounds terrible.
It is terrible. It's a fish that gets like 6 to 7 feet long, and its snout is very long and narrow, just like the alligators that do have the really long, narrow snouts that are designed to catch fish. Alligator gar. The head on that just put on a fish body.
Oh, Lord. Oh.
They are nuts. They reside in North America.
That sounds like some kind of crazy nightmare machine.
They are. But they're also ambush predators, and they're not really anything that we have to worry about as humans.
Right.
If
That's
you're if you're a nice tubby little fish swimming across, yes, that's when you need to worry. So I think a lot of these creatures are the basis of the stories of having a lake monster, having something in the water that we just don't know about. So with the case of Nessie, it comes down to, well, we really just don't have a way to support a living population of them.
Right.
Loch Ness hasn't been really around for that long for a plesiosaur or something similar to it to reside and survive in it. That, and just like Megalodon, a lot of large species of fish died out during the last ice age because it got too cold. This is kind of coinciding with a lot of other lake monsters that we have, again, here in North America. Plesiosaurs were reptiles.
Right.
that breathe air.
Right.
So you would have not necessarily 17 sightings in a year. You'd have 17 sightings in a day. Which goes to me believing that these monsters aren't really monsters, and, well, it's our imagination getting the best of us.
Mm-hmm.
I truly believe that a lot of people that go to Loch Ness, they go to see Nessie.
Oh, yeah.
So if they see something that they don't quite know what it is in the water, it is Nessie, which Loch Ness is home to some fairly large fish, not Nessie size, and it's also home to seals and otters. Monsters in the northern hemisphere residing in our lakes, it's tough for me to say yes. I love the idea of it. I think it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wonderful for the economy, which is probably why they get picked up so easily and so beloved by everyone. But not quite fitting the bill for me.
All right.
That being said, yeah, there's a lot of large things out there. And for reference as well, seals will travel in groups, pods, and sometimes even in straight lines.
Right.
So when you see seals traveling, all you see really is just humps going in and out of the water. I feel like that's actually one of the major reasons why people have these sea serpent spottings as well, because we as humans connect those bits of body that we see,
dots,
as
if you will,
as a part of a larger body.
Okay. All right.
So I'm sorry, but I just need more to believe in lake monsters.
So why can't something... I know that we established that lakes flow from the lake to the ocean. So, but why couldn't, in theory, a plesiosaur or anything else, if it did survive, why couldn't it swim up a river into a lake?
So it would have had to survive 2 extinction events. And if that's the case, or let's say if plesiosaurs in general survived, that species survived at enough of a population, then we probably wouldn't have whales, to be completely honest. Whales fit the same niche.
Okay.
Especially in their early days, because they were essentially kind of like wolves that went into the water. So they were inhabiting the same area as plesiosaurs would have. They're eating the same food that plesiosaurs would have, especially in their infancy as a species. And whales would not have been essentially taking over the seas that they have now. You know what I'm saying? Like, because we have another species rising to fit that same niche, one of those 2 competing species would die off. Right. The better one will win.
Okay. That's good.
And then after that, we also, again, we had the Ice Age as well. So when we're talking about theoretically here, why haven't we seen another large sea creature-esque thing pop up and fill that niche, right? We're too cold of a planet still.
Well,
we saw a lot of these creatures back where essentially most of the world was very, very warm. So you supported more of an ecosystem to have those top predators.
So you're telling me
global warming,
we let global warming go unchecked,
to a real Nessie,
we will have a Nessie. So at the very least, there's something good coming out of this.
Yeah, there's something.
All right. Okay, I concede. I'll concede lake monsters. I don't think you're 100% right. I think, like, your science makes sense, and I'm not going to sit here and say that, science isn't real or anything, but I am going to just say lakes are big. The world is big. Who are you to tell me what is, and I'm not saying it's a plesiosaur, but there's something weird. And as a just little final note here, final note, there was a photo taken by the satellite that provides satellite imagery for Apple Maps back in 2014 when it first started, and it shows something in Loch Ness. We'll try to link to that in the show notes if I can find it. And it was examined, and it was said, this is not a ship, this is not a shipwreck, this is something else, and it is large, and it looks like a freaking monster. So
now that we've taken a look at Nessie and the possibility of other lake monsters up here in the northern hemisphere, let's go ahead and drift on down out to the ocean.
Okay, all right.
Now we're talking about real sea monsters.
Real life sea monsters.
And this is where things are going to get fun.
All right.
So, one of the most heavily documented sea monster sightings actually occurred in the 1800s, in early 1800s, 1816, 1817, which is the Gloucester sea monster.
Gloucester.
Whatever.
Gloucester sea serpent.
to sea monster, sea serpent, things were said. I'm saying things now.
All right.
Words. Anyway, so this is probably one of the most iconic sea serpent sightings that we have, at least in the U.S. Happened right off the coast of
Massachusetts.
I am just having trouble with words now.
Yep.
You screwed me up with Gloucester.
Gloucester.
Or
it's actually Gloucester.
Gloucester.
We're sorry.
There's not an
what
H
it
in there,
comes
but
down to.
I keep saying
I
an
know.
H. Whoops. Anyway, so a massive sea
Gloucester.
serpent.
There we go. Gloucester.
Gloucester.
There we go. All right,
Gloucester.
I got it.
So there is a massive sea serpent spotted off of the coast of Massachusetts.
Okay.
This sea serpent was actually seen for quite some time over the course of months by hundreds of people. It became like a giant tourist attraction. It was seen by, again, hundreds from different locations, huge groups at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And from the description, it possibly had like a horse-like head and a body that trailed 80 to 100 feet long, which is massive.
It's very huge.
And from what we can also tell from most of the accounts is that it was not like out to eat everything either.
No,
it was a
peaceful.
super calm creature.
It was playful, even. It was described as playful by
Yeah.
one gentleman who saw it.
And the unfortunate thing is that eventually, essentially a bounty was placed on its head for the creature itself, and attempts were made to actually capture it. And several crews said that they witnessed, they fought it, they speared it,
They shot it point blank.
but it escaped their grasp every time.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
The Gloucester.
sea serpent, eventually faded away and was not seen again after this period of 2 years. But a couple boys claimed that they had found the offspring of this sea serpent, which unfortunately was actually just a very mal-shaped black sea snake.
Right. So, Gloucester is probably the most compelling case for sea serpents that I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And it's compelling for a number of reasons. The first one, like you had mentioned with the plesiosaurs, they're reptiles. In theory, sea snakes are reptiles. So they're going to surface for air. The highest record for most times a sea serpent or any sea monster, or maybe even any cryptid in general, has been sighted is the Gloucester serpent. It was sighted 17 times in one day by 17 different people, giving 17 different accounts to 17 different people. Like, these weren't all just coming into the same person and he's collaborating. They weren't like meeting up or anything like that. And they all described it pretty much the same.
Yep.
So, in addition to that, the other thing that I think that makes Gloucester a lot more believable than Nessie is the fact that it went away. It didn't stay. There are still people who say they see it.
That's the lovely thing about being in an ocean.
Right.
You can
swim away or you can die. I mean, it's not like this immortal being that has persisted 1,500 years. It was something that was there and now it's gone. It even got to the point where and it was retracted, but it got to the point where they deemed it, there was a group of scientists, they deemed it a new species, the like Atlantic humped snake or something like that. It's the most compelling one by far. So tell me why it's not real.
So the problem is this took place 200 years ago.
Right.
So yeah, all we really have are witness accounts, descriptions of the creature. And don't get me wrong, we have, again, hundreds of witness accounts, which is wonderful. That's what makes me feel like this is probably one of the most compelling. This is why I'm actually talking about it. There are a couple theories to it. One of my own is, it could be a large reptilian serpent. I don't know what it's doing in Massachusetts because it's freezing up there. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for that reason. Secondly, another creature that was described as having a horse-like head were actually eels.
Right.
For a long time, eels were described as a horse.
Water horse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, could it be a mega eel? Probably not. Why would it come to the surface that much? Eels typically hide in their ambush predators, just like those alligator guys.
There you go.
Ooh. Or, yes,
Really quick, you want to learn about eels, especially electric eels.
electric eels aren't eels, they're knifefish.
I'm just saying, you want to learn about these things, you go check out the Strange Animals podcast. It's amazing. She does an entire episode on like electric animals in general, and she talks about eels and how they like
I'm buzzing with
charge up
excitement.
and then they discharge. It's amazing. It's so cool. So check that out. Sorry, I just had to.
Oh, no, absolutely. And fun fact, yes, eels are not or electric eels aren't actually eels. They're actually a species of giant knifefish, which are also very cool creatures.
I believe it.
Anyway,
Keep going.
so giant eel doesn't really make sense. Again, ambush predators, but they match the description pretty well. And then we come to possibly one of the more morbid conclusions that I've discovered, that it could be a whale that was caught in a drift net. Which drift netting, in case you're unaware, is essentially a giant, I like to think of it like a fence made out of net. That you have floats on the top that keep it upright, and you just let sea creatures wander on in. So, of course, you're wanting to get just normal fish.
Right.
The unfortunate side of that is that a lot of other large creatures that you don't want to catch are ending up in those nets as well,
Right.
including dolphins, small whales, sharks, and it's very, very sad. If you Google the photos, it's
don't
not
want
the
to.
greatest.
80 feet long.
I'm getting there.
Okay. All right.
80 feet long. Right. So the unfortunate thing is large whales can get caught in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Humpback whales do travel along the Massachusetts shoreline as well. And again, drift netting was absolutely a thing in the early 1800s. A whale getting caught in a drift net could look like a giant sea serpent because we have those floaties on it trailing behind it. Again, we're talking about a playful creature.
Mm-hmm.
Whales aren't typically known to be malicious.
No, they're good dudes.
They come to the surface a lot. But the unfortunate thing is that a whale can live decades with drift netting attached to them. And once you have drift netting, it can get caught up in other things. And when you see the bobbing of the floats back and forth, again, just like with those seals up in Loch Ness, you connect the dots. It's something that we use all the time. It's how we identify threats. And as an artist, it's how I create implied lines.
All right.
Lines that aren't actually there, but our mind's eye connects them anyway. There's even a possibility that it was a trapped humpback whale.
It's possible, and I'll give you that it's possible. But the description of the creature, there were times when people saw it coil up like a snake, its body wrapped around itself, essentially. And I don't like, if it's drift netting, it's gonna not have, the creature's not gonna have control over the drift net. The drift net is just going to drift with them.
Yeah, so it's gonna get caught by currents. It's gonna get drug along with him. So if it turns around, that netting will take a moment it's gonna get cylindrical forced and spun.
Right, but it's a different visual phenomena, seeing something get caught by a current and forced than seeing something that is described as not an implied line, but an actual visually seen, as thick as a barrel body, curl up on itself. You know,
so
it denotes motion from the back end.
Don't believe that the netting itself could have been just intertwined with the rope and caught up on itself to give the appearance of a body.
I think that it's possible, but again, that body would be subject to the currents and the movements of the front, whereas it showed the entire thing moving, or it was reported that the entire thing moved like in tandem with each other, and in such a way that they saw it not just lazily or drawn by currents, but with an actual force from the back end curl around itself or around a vessel. It didn't ever attack anybody, but it did go around vessels and things like that. It's possible, but I think it's a stretch to say that like this creature that had a net on it, the net seemed to look like a body that then moved all by itself, as opposed to just being something that's being dragged along or a current along, you know?
in retort, again, the human eye plays tricks. And if there's one thing that I know for certain is that a lot of people do not know the oceans. I don't.
Right.
Not nearly well enough. I have learned about several new species of animal just looking up information about this today. And that's from someone that has, you know, aquatic background for fish and wildlife in that regards, because I do have in my mind a lake monster of sorts.
Right.
So in case anyone's wondering, I have something called an ornate bashir, which is a really cool fish, very long in body. It'll actually get up to about 2 feet in length, which is pretty darn sweet. Has teeth, which is also, of course, very sweet.
Yeah.
But probably the sweetest thing about it is that it has lungs.
Oh.
It has lungs. It
That's
will
weird.
come to the surface, and its pectoral fins are so developed that it will use them to crawl.
That's terrifying.
It is
That's really scary.
like a
man.
snapshot.
You
in
sleep with this
evolutionary.
thing in your room?
No, dude, it's in the kitchen.
Oh, okay, good. So if it like crawls, it's gonna have a hard time.
Well, I have
carrying you.
a top to it, Sam. It's not gonna jump out and start
Okay,
crawling around.
but one time I put Baron in his crate, and he busted out of the crate. So maybe it could bust out of this thing.
Hopefully not.
One other weird thing about the Gloucester sea serpent, though, is that I think it's something like 40 years later, it was on the other side of the Atlantic, but it was, I believe, in Liverpool. There was a British ship. I can say words. A British ship called the Banner
It's
that
only a
was
four-letter word too.
right attacked by a sea serpent with the exact same description as the Gloucester serpent. So,
Sounds like an old fisherman tale.
but it wasn't. You
Okay.
have multiple witnesses. It wasn't just some guy in a boat being like, "I saw the Gloucester serpent."
Did he have
Like,
a peg leg?
He probably had 3 peg legs.
What?
Right? No, this was an actual documented, multiple people citing it and reporting the same sort of thing. This wasn't a big fish story. But just saying, just putting it out there.
Again, the ocean has mysteries that we just don't really know of. What I do know is that the origins of sea monsters have probably been plaguing mankind since its birth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the coolest fish that could have inspired where we come up with sea monsters is probably the oarfish, which lives in deep sea. It is extremely long fish as well. And essentially, you've got a large fish head, and then the rest of its body is essentially like a ribbon, giant ribbon. They only come up to surface areas when they're sick, apparently, what I read about them.
Yeah.
Weird enough. So if you're sick, you come to the surface. And
It's
unfortunately,
America.
some of those fish do die,
Mm-hmm.
wash up on shore, and then holy cow,
We've got
we've got
a
this
sea monster.
giant sea serpent just coming out of the water from who knows where.
Mm-hmm.
Other things that kind of cause what I would assume is kind of the sea monster craze is also just whale carcasses.
Mm-hmm.
When you come to a really decomposed body of a whale, its actual jaws especially its lower jaws, look a lot like tusks. And I put it in the show notes for you.
Yeah, I see
So
it.
I think whale carcasses alone are another easy way to misidentify a creature that we would obviously know what it was
If we saw
if it was living. And whales are actually kind of cool because a lot of actually sea monster blobs that wash up on the shore can be attributed to them. I had no idea that a sperm whale, a sperm whale looks like what? Well, their heads are like mostly like rectangular shape.
Right.
If you cut their head diagonally,
Who would do that to a
I'm
sperm whale?
just think about it mentally. Just take that rectangular head and cut it diagonally
Right.
across.
It's a triangle.
Yes, 2 triangles. Its actual skull is a part of the lower triangle. The rest of the front of
It's
it
just blubber.
is all blubber. And a giant blob of this blubber actually washed up on shore in Florida in the late 1800s. And due to the decay of it, we actually thought that it could have been a kraken, a large octopus, because the shape of it, very round, blubber, decomposing. But it also looked like it had the stems that were cut off of legs that we associate with octopi. Octopi? Octopus?
Octopi. Yeah.
It is octopi?
Yep.
Perfect. So much, though, that a paper picked it up about 2 counties away and actually had an illustration of it, but drew eyes on it. Thankfully, we discredited that. It wasn't real. And scientists were later able to actually analyze it and find that it was, again, just a giant piece of blubber from a whale.
Right.
But if we look at old-timey maps as well, we can kind of see the inspiration of whale carcasses that get put into them. If you take a look at the old decorative maps, you can see creatures that tend to be half boar-like, and then the rest is fish, and things that have obvious blowholes as well.
Right. Yeah,
I think a lot of those can be attributed to whales and what we conjure up, especially, again, with their lower jaws. They look a lot like tusks.
Crazy, freaky things. Yeah.
They do. It like the body of a whale is incredible once you take all the flesh off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying just go.
Yeah, please don't
Clean some whale bones.
I'll post. He put a really dope whale skeleton in the notes, and I'll post that on Instagram tonight when it comes out. It's incredible to see. So yeah, it's crazy.
We've got chunks of decomposing blubber off of whales, and then there's actually another whale that I had no idea existed, but can be attributed to multiple different sea creatures that have washed up on shore. One was essentially off of the Santa Cruz area in California in the mid 1900s, which was from the images that I saw, looked like kind of a dolphin-shaped head, but its body was massively long. We actually have a creature that resembles. It's actually the Baird's beak or giant bottlenose whale, which is an extremely long creature and does look almost just like an elongated dolphin.
It does.
Yeah,
it really does.
Unfortunately, we also have, I'm not sure if you remember it, but there is a recent photo of a carcass that washed up in Russia as well that actually resembles a decomposing Baird's beak whale as well. As well as a whale. Yeah, which and a lot of people are like, no, it's not. It looks like it has fur. But a lot of decomposing creatures that we pull from lakes, a lot of filaments that break away start to become to look like fur. And whales are sometimes born with fur that fall off later on, again, showing their ancestry to being once living on land. So I really do think that the Baird's beak whale, a creature that is not well known, can be attributed to some of these sightings and some of these odd bodies that we don't know what it's from, and we jump to conclusions thinking that it's an unknown creature. The poor Baird's beak whale just swimming out, doing its own thing,
doing its own life,
and we just assume it's a horrible creature. But another creature that decomposes oddly and has been also attributed to several different sightings decomposing carcasses of some sort of sea creature is the basking shark.
Okay.
Now, being a shark, the basking shark, its body its skeletal structure is completely cartilage.
Right. Sharks don't have bones, do they?
No.
Yeah. That's
I mean, their teeth are basically bone, but no, they don't have bone.
That's crazy.
So sharks don't have bone, which means their decomposition is really interesting. And I did also give you a photo of
I saw that.
Yep.
There's a lot of gross stuff in
basking sharks, in case you're not sure, are filter feeding creatures. Just like our largest whales that we have today, they filter feed on essentially krill. But the interesting with basking sharks is because they have to open their mouths so large that there is not a lot of soft tissue that connects the top of their head with the rest of their head, because they have gills going along their neck, and then they just have a wide gaping mouth to essentially scoop as much food as they possibly can as they're drifting along in the ocean.
All right.
Because of this, when a basking shark decomposes, usually the first thing that goes is the soft tissue that holds together their mouth, their lower jaw, to the top half of their head. And the one thing that does tend to continue to stay is the tip of their snout. Because along that ridge to the tip of their snout is the thickest and hardest cartilage in their bodies, because that follows their spinal cord. The rest of their body begins to decompose, and it typically works from essentially the top and the bottom inward.
Okay.
So the first thing that will decompose along with their mouths are going to be their fins and flippers. The pectoral flippers typically stay the longest because they are pretty rigid, and then the interior of their stomachs will start to wear away as well. This is a really weird looking carcass when it washes up on shore. So weird that it was attributed to being a giant sea creature that had 6 legs and full of hair back in the 1800s as well, claimed by, it was Englishmen that had washed up onto this shoal of rocks. So if you can imagine something that had a small head, a very long neck, and then 6 legs, essentially basking out on a group of rocks and covered in hair. That is a crazy sight.
That's a sea
now,
monster.
unfortunately, they weren't actually able to pull that sea monster into shore and actually get it like photographed or actually tested. But again, the way that basking sharks decompose, their flippers will maintain. And also, they also have a pair of smaller flippers towards their back end. And those are usually associated with reproduction. With males, those flippers can be quite large as well, which is possibly where we're getting that third pair of legs.
Okay.
And again, with decomposition, the filaments become to look like hair.
Right.
And probably the most recognizable images that we have of past 40 years is actually one of a sea monster that was pulled out of the water by a Japanese fishing boat. And I do have an image again for you here, Sam, in the notes.
Gross.
There's several different photos of it. But yeah, it is very, very gross. But if you look at it, and again, you can Google this as well, it has essentially a kind of bending over look. And it looks like there's a small head, kind of in a reptilian shape, a long neck that comes up to essentially shoulders with flippers. And then we've got more just kind of body dangling down.
It does look exactly like how you would think a plesiosaur would look.
Yeah, especially one that was decomposing really bad. But if we look at that image a little bit more, especially side by side with an image of a basking shark, again, the head resembles a lot of the essentially remaining snout portion of it. And then towards the back, before it actually curves downward and starts to droop, we have slits that look a lot like gills. And if you take a closer look as well, we can see a little bit of like a lower jaw and then the pectoral fins. And I truly believe that this is just another basking shark carcass.
Yeah, I say that's fair. We'll post those pictures. I'm trying to figure out how to put pictures in show notes, and if I can, I will.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of sea monsters that we find, especially when it comes to carcasses, are just honestly the lack of knowledge on our behalf.
Right.
And that's the crazy thing with the sea is that for me, it's like the dark. The darkness is scary because I don't know what's there. The sea is scary because we don't know what's there.
Totally true.
And we still don't. We know extremely little amount about the sea. So much, though, that we didn't even really know that giant squid officially existed for a very long time.
Yeah.
And that takes me to the deep ocean, where when we see giant squid and other giant invertebrates, which this is known as deep sea gigantism, and is only shown so far, at least, in invertebrates. So crustaceans, squid-like creatures, octopus, which does not rule out the possibility that a kraken-like octopus could exist.
And it does.
Could exist.
And it's coming for you.
So when we have giant squid that prey on giant invertebrates, just like, again, octopi do, that's when we have these larger predatory creatures feeding on something that will sustain them. So that gives me cause to think that there might be a giant octopus yet to be discovered. And that's the greatest thing about the ocean currently, is that deep down, we have no idea what's down there.
Yeah, is that a great thing, or is that a
terrifying
terrible
things
thing
down there? Goblin sharks are so weird. Goblin sharks and eels were actually some of the inspiration to the aliens in the Alien franchise, to the xenomorphs, which is super cool. I think it's at least super cool. And then we have crazy looking creatures like anglerfish. So who's to say that there isn't another deep, large dwelling sea monster living somewhere down there?
Yep.
I really think there could be. I really hope there actually is.
Right.
Because the ocean just holds so much potential.
Right.
To meet my imagination.
Right. All right.
I'm not done.
Okay.
I'm not done. Because there's one other sea creature I want to take a stab at, and that's mermaids.
Okay.
It makes zero sense for mermaids to be a thing.
All right.
Want to know why, Sam?
Why? Evolution?
Because shoulders do not make any sense in an aquatic life form.
If they're swimming, though, you got to use your shoulders
Sam,
to swim.
do you see any other life form that has shoulders and swims in the water?
But no other life form is a mermaid.
It also doesn't make sense of a species specifically dining on sailors.
Right. That is a little weird.
Fish to feed upon. Why are you choosing
Because-
the 5 sailors in the boat across the way there?
Because
that's so much harder.
That's their family, Jason.
It's not their family. No, Sam.
All right.
And if we look at other creatures that have changed from living on land into the ocean, again, whales, they don't have shoulders. They're very streamlined because that is the most efficient way to get around. Now we're going to get to the fun part. And I know this has probably been a long one so far.
That's all right.
But let's talk about the possibility lake monsters.
Okay.
Where do you think they could live, Sam?
Everywhere.
You think they're everywhere. Okay.
They could be everywhere.
They could be
I'm
everywhere.
not saying they are everywhere. I'm saying they could be right in your own bathtub or in the neighborhood pool.
Okay, yeah, that's probably urine. And is also another monster. Yeah, exactly.
The silent killer.
That is gross.
Yeah.
And Band-Aids. Oh, man. Don't go in the public pools.
Yeah. Anyway.
Don't do that.
No, I would say I don't know because I'm not a geologist or an aquologist. What's
Marine biologist?
Well, I'm not talking about I'm talking about like water in general. Who studies water?
I'm still going to stick with marine biologist.
All right, I'm not a marine biologist like George Costanza. I would say, just based on my thought patterns, probably like the Great Lakes.
The Great Lakes,
Superior,
yeah. So
and-
that's where I would assume anywhere in the northern hemisphere, that would be my number one ticket.
Yeah.
But
They're too
let's
cold.
go.
Is that it?
Let's go a little bit
All right.
farther south. So there's a couple different locations along the equator that I would make the assumption that something really large could live there.
Right.
The first one is actually not even a lake; it's a bay, which I feel actually supports it even more because then we could have some sort of large aquatic creature swim up into it, which that is Lake Maracaibo. I hope I did not pronounce that.
Maracaibo.
You're just more confident with saying it.
Yep.
That's really what it is. It makes
It's
it
not
sound
any
way
more
better.
right than what you said, but
Anyway.
people trust me.
It's a bay in Venezuela. It's actually huge. It's one of the largest lakes, in quotation marks, in South America. And it lets out in the Caribbean Sea. So we got warm waters, large body of water, and potentially safer from other threats, which could allow for something big to start growing. Another lake in South America that I actually like quite a bit is Lake Titicaca.
Okay, don't pretend that you don't know how to pronounce this word.
I really hope it's not what I think it is.
Every 12-year-old boy knows how to pronounce this
Titicaca.
lake. There we go.
I was really hoping it's something else.
It's not.
Titicaca
Lake Titicaca.
resides on the border between Peru and Bolivia, and it's actually one of the larger lakes in the Andes, still somewhat close to a coastal area, and is thought to be the birthplace of the Incans, which is, first off, kind of cool.
Yeah.
And secondly, known to be home to a species of giant frog.
All right.
So, giant frog typically means that we have a food source for something maybe bigger. Other than that, the Amazon River is actually home to a lot of very, very large fish already.
And piranhas.
Piranhas are a different kind of animal.
They're a monster.
They
though.
are absolute monsters.
Yeah.
For something that's the size of a dinner plate.
Right.
I mean, 110%.
Strip the flesh from your bone.
In another place that I feel like we could actually maybe see something be undiscovered and be a freshwater monster is maybe the Great Lakes in Africa.
Okay.
So when you look at a satellite image of Africa, the way I think of it, it looks kind of like a dinosaur, and there's a lake that's right on the eastern side of it. It looks like an eye.
Right.
That's a part of one of the African Great Lake systems. There's a few more lakes that reside alongside of it. Those are large, narrow lakes.
Okay.
They're actually the home of cichlids, which are a species of fish that are very, very cool. I like them a lot. That's actually what dwells with my Bashir in my aquarium. But they are, I know, right? Crazy.
You're a nerd.
I totally am. And another large fish that we actually get from not necessarily that area, but the Nile is the Egyptian perch, which is a fish that can also get up to about 6 feet in length.
All right.
Plus, Africa already has some big stuff. We got crocodiles. We got hippos. Nile perches. I mean, we've got a lot of large things that could possibly support another large predator that we just don't know of yet. Plus, again, it is a warmer area. typically you have a more diverse ecosystem in warmer climates.
Mm-hmm.
There is one sea monster that I truly believe is the mother of all sea monsters,
Right.
and the one that you should be afraid of, Sam.
Okay.
It's the bull shark.
The bull shark.
Yes.
All
You know
right.
why the bull shark
Why?
is freaking crazy?
Tell me.
It is crazy because the bull shark has recently been kind of claiming a lot of thought to have been great white and tiger shark attacks.
Okay.
We've actually rediscovered that the bull shark is probably the main predator for a lot of those kind of attacks that we associated with bigger sharks. The bull shark is unfortunately extremely aggressive, territorial, and is easy to provoke.
Okay.
So that in combination with the fact that it lives in the Gulf Coast region,
Okay.
Gulf of Mexico,
Yeah.
we have a lot of people on the beach there. It also likes shallow water, which is another unfortunate characteristic of it.
Right.
So we have a shark that is aggressive, likes to be in shallow water, easy to provoke, but the most scary thing about it is that it can actually store salt in its organs and swim upstream.
Oh man.
These sharks could actually live for quite a long time in fresh water. So don't go to
Yeah.
the Mississippi
Or
because
anywhere.
there might be some sharks up in there.
Let's not go
There's
anywhere.
actually been one caught all the way up in Ohio,
Oh crap.
falling the Mississippi.
Wow.
So, in my mind, the only real sea monster that we should be afraid of and take in consideration is probably the bull shark,
Okay.
which is one heck of a shark.
All right. Okay.
Sam?
Yeah. Or the ocean itself. The
Or
ocean itself
and,
is
you
the
know, I
real
think that's
monster
probably
here.
the biggest thing is
Yeah.
that the fact that, again, like the dark, we don't know what's out there.
Right.
And unfortunately, even though we might have classified something and we know
Yeah.
what that species is, the general public does not. So it's easy
Right.
to pick up and be like, we've got a sea monster, because we just don't know. And it's not as mainstream of knowledge to know what lies in our oceans right off the coast than what it is to know what's in the woods right in our backyards.
Right. Sasquatch. I hear you. So,
Sam?
I've done a lot of talking already, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But I mentioned earlier, I have a problem with with like the modern like scientific crusade against sea monsters, in that to sit and say, well, that wasn't a sea monster, that was an oarfish. Well, that wasn't a sea monster, that was a basking shark. That was a Baird's beaked whale or something. These are all sea monsters. Like a freaking oarfish is a sea monster. It's one of the freakiest things I've ever seen in my life.
Super cool fish.
So what it comes down
they
to,
actually have filaments that
right,
streak off from their heads and these long like ribbons as well.
Awful.
That can be super colorful.
awful.
But they'll stretch out like 3 feet in length.
Terrible.
It's like it reminds me of like a cockatoo
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
feathers. It just reminds me straight of that. Oarfish are really cool,
Right.
but they're sea monsters.
That's my problem with it. Is everyone's like, well, sea monsters don't exist. Hell yes, sea monsters exist. They're everywhere. Oarfish are sea monsters. Sharks are sea monsters. We didn't believe, quote unquote, believe or have evidence of the giant colossal, or I think it's the colossal squid, which is like 40 freaking feet, until the early 2000s. Like, for one thing, the ocean is too big to say there are no sea monsters. For another thing, there are sea monsters.
I think when
We
it
just
comes-
know what they are.
I think it comes down to classifying them, actually making them real.
Right.
A sea monster is something that we fabricate in our imaginations, and we blow up to scales that are unimaginable, and these writhing creatures. While when we actually find them and discover them,
Right.
we classify them into actual what they are. That's what I love about it. We're seeking out the actual truth about what we believe to be sea monsters, and we're learning about them.
Right. They're still sea monsters.
Oh,
though.
yeah.
Like, that's my biggest thing. People are like, sea monsters don't exist. They totally exist. All of these things that we've talked about today, which this was like a science episode for goodness sake, but that's okay. That's good.
That's what I do, Sam.
That's a Jason special for you. So that's all I have to say, is that if you don't believe that the ocean is terrifying, you're an idiot. And,
man.
and it's
It
going
is
to claim
totally
your
terrifying.
soul. You're going down. You got to respect the ocean, man.
Mhm.
You don't just Yeah.
There's
you
a
gotta
reason
respect
why those fish didn't grow legs and walk on out.
it. Yeah,
They wanted to stay,
that's true.
and they became good at it.
Plus, you also have like the freaking things where it's like, we thought this was extinct for 60 million years, and then it comes up.
Living fossils.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the coelacanth.
Yeah, the coelacanth.
Perfect. I was really hoping you'd bring that up because I didn't put it in the notes.
Okay.
Coelacanths have evolved
Right.
since we've seen them in the fossil record. They have existed, but they also are not the perfect snapshot of what we had previously. They have changed slightly. And the same thing with crocodilia.
Yeah.
What we think of as living fossils today. Crocodiles still have evolved slightly, and the crocodiles that we have currently are essentially the perfect versions of what they can be
Right.
for where they live in their biome. But as far as crocodiles go, we actually had dozens of them.
Right.
We had crocodiles that actually had plating armor on them like an armadillo.
Right.
That's awesome.
It's awesome. It's terrifying.
They no longer
Yeah.
exist because of, well, being pushed out by other species.
Right.
So,
And I'm not saying that like the plesiosaur is still alive.
and see, that's what I'm terrified about, honestly, is crocodiles being in, like, northern
Oh
America.
yeah.
Like,
Oh yeah.
crocodiles freak me out.
Terrible, because they're just blood hungry. Yeah. It's not like your typical, like a wolf, even, for instance, where it's like a wolf isn't going to attack you unless it's starving. Like, these freaking crocodiles
Crocodiles
will
are more
kill you.
opportunistic.
They're
They're ambush predators.
They hate humankind and what we have done to them.
I turning them into our boots.
Yeah.
I-
Seriously.
That's fair.
If someone
That's
took
fair.
my family and turned them
and-
into boots,
yeah,
I would
and
plot
walk
their
around
revenge all day.
With our skin on their feet,
Yeah.
of all places.
It's wrecked. It's wrong. Yeah.
I kind of want like a crocodile vest then. That'd be kind of cool. No, I
Anyway. So I'm not,
Sea
like I
monsters,
said,
man.
I'm not saying that about like the plesiosaurs and stuff. I'm just saying in general, megalodon. Maybe there is a few megalodon out there. Who
Nope.
freaking knows? I know that you're saying no. I know, I heard your science, but maybe there is, maybe it has evolved in its own
There
way.
might have been something that had convergence evolution to take the place of megalodon.
Anyway, all right. That's
So,
sea monsters.
That's
Yeah.
the special on sea monsters.
There we go.
How do you feel, Sam?
I feel fine. I'm not like
Yeah?
super concerned about it or anything.
Okay.
I don't go to the ocean in general. The last time I was on the ocean was a few
ocean's
months
scary,
ago.
and there's sharks
yeah.
in there.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the ocean at large, so it
But
doesn't affect me because I'm not going
Them alligator
there.
gar. Oh,
Yeah, that sounds
those
terrible.
are also cool.
That sounds awful.
And that's almost everywhere in the U.S.
Yeah, it's terrible. Anyway, all right. Any last words? Anything else we want to say before we get into all the rest of it?
Keep an open mind, guys.
Keep an open mind. I like it.
Do your own research. It's always fun.
It is fun. It's fun to learn things. It is. It's a good time.
Yeah? Did you learn a lot today, Sam?
I did. I totally did.
You look a little pooped. A little tired out.
I am a little tired out. It's hard for me to pay attention to science for too long, other than with Chris Cogswell, the mad scientist, because he makes it fun.
I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding.
I'm just dashing
No,
all your hopes with
you
sea
make
creatures.
it fun. It is. It's like, well, and for me, it's just one of those things where it's like, it's one of those things where skepticism overrides everything else, and like there are people who will not let their minds be open at all, and just say no, regardless of the fact that we find the living fossils and we find these terrifying monsters, and it's like, yeah. Anyway,
I think what it comes down to, in that regards, is just what we consider to be monsters to ourselves.
right,
Oarfish, to me, are just a really, really cool aquatic life.
right,
For ancient people, it was ancient people, it was a sea monster.
yeah,
Same thing with, whale carcasses. They were attributed to being a boar that had the body of a fish.
right. I can dig it. It's not what I want to dig, but it's what I will dig. Anyway, all right. Well, dude, that was a good.
There's another
Special.
Jason special.
There we go.
Hot and fresh.
Out the kitchen. All right. So,
Sam, what else do we have to talk about this week?
we have a few things. I just want to let everyone know. I'm sure if you follow us on social media, you've seen it, but we had an interview that we did with a local magazine, newspaper, Boise Weekly, come out. That was cool.
Yeah, the wonderful folks over at Boise Weekly.
Yeah, they're fantastic. And I mean, yeah, it's something that growing up as a kid, Boise Weekly was like, and it still is, like the cool periodical. It's like what you grab to find out. Yeah, it's the hip thing, and it still pretty much is. And so it was like a dream come true to see it. So thank you to Boise Weekly especially. Thank you to all of our listeners who got us there. And that leads us into our next big news, is that we are officially a part of the Dark Myths Collective, which
yeah, what does that mean?
Totally. Well, if you follow me or us on social media at all, you'll have seen it because I posted it like 100 times. But essentially what the Dark Myths Collective is, it's different from what we're already a part of, which is Ace Podcast, which is a great network that we're not leaving at all. We're not like severing ties. We're still a part of Ace Podcast Network, and we're still happy to be. But the collective is more of just a group of podcasters. And what really makes me excited, not only has this been a dream for me personally since before we started the podcast, but I mean, the shows that we talk about, the ones that I cannot recommend to you enough, that I've talk about every other episode, Chris Cogswell.
He really does.
I do.
All the time.
Chris Cogswell of the Dark Myth, or not the Dark Myth, of the Mad Scientist. Mike Brown from Pleasing Terrors, he got in about a day after we did.
Chris.
Oh my gosh, it would be amazing.
One of these days.
Chris, come to Boise. It'd be great.
We have lots of beers.
Mike, come to Boise. Everybody come to Boise and have a beer with us. It'd be amazing. But, it's these shows that, some of which are the reason that we're doing this. I mean, Astonishing Legends, if we're like tracing the genealogy of Not Alone, Astonishing Legends is its father. Like, they are the reason we started a show, because I was listening to them and I was like, I want to do this. And even though I had listened to dozens of other podcasts, that was the one. And now we're in the same group as them. Unexplained by Richard McLean Smith. It's an amazing show, very similar to ours, that we've recommended before. The Mad Scientist podcast, Pleasing Terrors, Secret Transmission, Monsters Among Us. That it's the thing that's so freaking cool about being a part of it isn't just that it's like my life dream, which it is, but I gotta get a new one now. It's crazy. But
that's been happening pretty often for you in the past 4 months.
It really is. I've had like these dreams and I've been like, could you even imagine? And then we just kill it. We just murder that dream. And then we take its body and we build a bigger dream. But in any case, that got really intense. The thing that's...
I was a little scared there for a second.
Good. You should be. The thing that's cool about being a part of Dark Myths is that our listeners... They're not that you guys are monolithic in any sense. You're all you are each a beautiful individual who we love very much, but you have a lot of similar interests. If you're listening to our show, you like that kind of stuff. And as opposed to Ace Podcast, which is made up of a variety of amazing shows in a lot of different genres and all of that and topics, shows like ours, shows like Beware and Warning, which if you haven't listened to Beware and Warning, it's the Choose Your Own Adventure one. It's amazing. Alan is just, he's hilarious. So go check that out. I'll post a link to it in our show notes. But, Ace Podcast has a huge variety. Dark Myths focuses on podcasters who are looking to perfect their craft, hone their craft, and do it in a way that gives people a bit of a chill doing it. And, for us to be accepted, it's amazing. But I'm excited because we're going to be, you guys are going to love any show that's on there. I can almost guarantee it. And the first one I want to talk to you about, it's one that we've never done before. We haven't ever mentioned before. And right? We're branching out. I didn't even start listening to it. I want to say it was like 4 days ago. I started listening to it and I've listened to 20 episodes.
Holy cow,
yeah,
Sam.
In the last 4 days. It's amazing. It's called A New Winter. And it's an audio drama podcast that's set in a small British town in the winter of 2000. There's a series of murders and disappearances that start to occur, and the narrator is speaking in memory. He's speaking in the present day, but recalling it, he was wrapped up in all of it. I mean, the murders themselves are creepy, terrifying. It's a family that gets slaughtered over the course of a few days. Whoa. And then he uncovers like this ring of corruption. And I'm about halfway through it to being caught up. There's about, I want to say 40 or 50 episodes. But it is so well done that I have been listening to it, especially as I'm starting to or laying in bed before I go to sleep, and my heart will start pounding and I will feel nervous and scared. I'm emotionally invested into the narrator and his story, which is something that I've listened to a lot of audio drama, and most of the time I just listen because it's a good story or this or that. But this is one of the first ones that's really just taken me in and made me have a visceral response to it. So that's A New Winter. We're going to link to that in the show notes for sure. And you're going to hear about a lot of other great podcasts from Dark Myths. And you should go to darkmyths.org. Check it out. Look at everything. It's amazing. Yeah. So there's that.
Sweet.
I was so excited to tell you guys this news. I've been waiting all week. Anything else you can think of before we do the typical?
No, I think we should get down to the weekly goodness.
Yeah. All right. So we gained a lot of patrons this last week. I think we gained like 5 or 6. So let's go through them. Our first patron is Dominikas Rubinskas. And again, if I messed up your name, just like with everybody else, let me know how to say it. Email and text us, whatever, and we'll do it again next week. But yay, Dominikas! All right. The second one is Shannon Corsi. Yay, Shannon! The third one is Sandy Spinks. Yay, Sandy! The fit. What did I just say? The third one. Okay.
Yes.
So the fourth one is Richie Unrain. Yay, Richie! He's our boss. He's great.
I love him.
He's fantastic. What did I say? The fourth. So the fifth one is Jennifer Cunningham. Yay,
Yeah,
Jennifer! And Belle. Oh yeah, Belle. I can't remember if I cut that out. Belle is one of our best Australian listeners. Well, all of our Australian listeners are our best Australian listener, but she just loves the show, and she's always talking about it on social media. She invited Jason to come to Australia, and she'll take him to Steve Irwin's museum or zoo.
Does he have a museum too?
Maybe, man. He's a national hero down there.
I want to go to the Australia Zoo so bad.
Yeah, but Belle is she's fantastic. So, yay, Belle! Another great podcast, one we've told you about before, History or Something Like It. It's hosted, History or Something Like It. It's hosted by a fellow named Chris. So, yay, Chris! All right, and then the best part of the week, not the best part of the week. Every part of the week is good, and reading our patrons is dope. Which, by the way, I'm not trying to pressure anybody. If you think that the show is worth anything, whether it's $1, whether it's $5, $10. Actually, we don't have a $10 option. Whether you think it's $1, $3, or $5,
or the 100,
or the 100, which you'd have to manually send us somehow. Head over to patreon.com/notalonepodcast. I spend personally probably 20 to 30 hours a week on this. Jason, I would say probably 10 to 15. Do you think?
Dude, ever since I started drawing, it's
oh yeah,
if I'm not working or at the gym,
that's true.
I'm probably trying to figure out more of this.
Yeah, and Jason is, in addition to researching and all of that, he is creating great art that we're going to be putting on merch soon and all of that.
Yeah, my video games have totally
it's
felt
terrible,
neglected.
isn't it?
Yeah,
it's terrible. But if you think that the show is worth a monetary value to you, we'd love your support. But you know what? If you don't, or if you do but you just can't afford it, we completely understand, and we still love you. We still think you're great. We are just $2 away from our first goal of $100 a month. So, again, $1, $3, or $5. If any of that sounds good to you, head over to patreon.com/notalonepodcast. We'll link to it. It's entirely up to you. We do put out bonus things. We do a 15-minute debrief for the $1. A bonus show at least once a month. I'm trying to do it twice a month. This month we were down to the wire, but a bonus show for $3, and then a full extended edition. Sometimes it's up to an extra hour of us just being idiots every week at the interspersed
so if
with
you
the
want
normal
2
show.
hours of us being
idiots. You can do
That's
that
where
for
the
$5,
magic
so.
really happens.
So again, if that sounds good to you, do it. If it doesn't, I still love you. I'm still just so happy that you're listening. And that takes us to some other people that we love deeply, which is the fellas and what's the lady fella? Lady fellas. The fellas and the lady fellas. The men and the women. The brave men and women. I am just on a tangent here. You
Yeah,
want to
dude,
say something?
this is like
You
the
wanna say to me at
spiraling
all?
of you being unconscious and not eating because you're unconscious and
because
not
I'm
eating.
unconscious because
Yeah.
I'm not eating.
You're spiraling hard.
All of the fantastic people who leave us iTunes reviews. We're up to 52 5-star ratings and 1 2-star rating, which we're still fine with.
It's all right.
And so we'd like to thank everyone who's left a review in the last week. So we are looking at, who do we got here? We have Mr. Bulldog 1070. Thank you, Mr. Bulldog. We have Jennifer DeWald. Thank you, Jennifer. We have Coco 0877. That's Corey Constable of the Omitted podcast, which is a beautiful, just historical show. So check him out. We have Lovely Sierra. We have Mama Can't Sleep. And we have...
Gosh.
I know. I love
Sorry,
it.
Mama.
And we have Mike Roz. All of them beaming 5-star reviews. We love them all. But I'm going to read Mama Can't Sleeps because it makes me happy. So the format is... It's titled Tell Me a Spooky Tale. The format is 2 hosts tell you stories about alien visits, demonic possessions, or mysterious disappearances. The tales are compelling, but what I really like about this podcast is it feels like I am listening in on a cool conversation between smart, interesting friends, and I am one of them. I like that so much. I love that so much. And that's true. We're your friends. You're our friends. We love y'all. There's it's crazy. The growth we've seen and the amount of people we have, between 5,000 and 6,000 people who are listening to every show within the week that we put it out. And that is just unreal. And I just want you to know. I finally made
more friends, Sam.
I know, man.
I made more friends.
And just thank you all. Thank you guys so much for investing your time. The ones who do choose to invest your money, but if nothing else, your time is infinitely valuable to us, and we're so grateful to be able to spend some of it with you. So
it's absolutely wonderful.
And really quick as well, before we wrap up here, we are still selling t-shirts. We're doing it to where we have either 50 pre-orders or by July 30th, whatever comes first. So far, we have sold 3, and I am super proud of that and super proud of everyone who's bought one. So thank you so much. And then also make sure, tune in next week. We're going to do our big local legend show. It's probably going to be like 2 hours long, and it's going to be fantastic. We're just going to talk about Idaho for a long time and just tell you everything you need to know about the Gem State in general, and especially with spookiness and UFOs and Bigfoot. And there's a lot of different subjects. So, yeah. All right. You did it last week. You did do it last week.
All right, Sam. Plunder the depths of your heart here.
All right. Remember, whether you're out on a ship, searching for something that may simply not want to be found, or Googling in an attempt to kill your best friend's dreams, you are not alone.